Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the Haydn folk song Forage. All 429 Haydn folk song arrangements, individually covered in videos lasting a minimum of 20 to 30 minutes each. Yes, 429 of them. I'm just kidding. Couldn't resist. I saw this big box sitting there, and a lot of you have been saying, well, what are you doing next? I told you we're going to do the string quartets next, but that's okay. That's okay. We can get to the folk song arrangements and the baritone trios and all these other things that we can go insane looking at much later, if ever. So why am I here? Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something that has really been bugging me lately, and that is the fading reputations of the great conductors. I mean, they are fading. They will be fading. It's inevitable that they fade up to a point. But do they have to fade? That's the question. The reason I was talking about that is I was thinking lately about Karl Böhm. Good old Karl Böhm. He made some fabulous recordings. His most enduring recordings will undoubtedly be operas, particularly Mozart, Wagner, and Strauss. And the reason will be as much because he had great singers as because of his own contributions, because opera's inherently a collaborative medium, and it's not really a conductor's medium. Even Wagner. At the end of the day, you go for the voice. So there's that. So his name is always going to be around. But I was thinking about, remember the big Deutsche Grammophon Böhm boxes? There were like 5 or 6 of them. There was early Böhm, there was the late Böhm, there was the symphony edition, then there were the big box of orchestral stuff and the big box of opera stuff. And it's all out of print. And here's the question. What is going to happen to these guys' reputations? I mean, we're in uncharted territory now, really, in a way. If labels don't continue to reissue, re-release, or in some way promote, having released it, their legacy, because they're not doing anything now. They're not doing anything at all. These box sets come out. You all know, and I read from your comments, sometimes they're impossible to find. We don't know when they're coming. We don't know how long they're going to be in the catalog. They disappear before we even have a chance to order them sometimes. If you do order them, if there's a mistake or something's wrong with them, it never gets corrected because it's never going to get reissued. Sony fires its entire classical division practically. That was doing those beautiful box sets, which we know were selling. Whether they made economic sense for whatever other reasons, I don't know, but they sold out of what they had. And we have no idea where any of this is going. But my question isn't just, availability of product. It's how are we going to remember these artists? And to what degree? Because, if you look at music history, if you look at the 19th century, we're talking about conductors, but it might as well be, you could be pianists or violinists just as easily. You have names, legendary names who nobody heard. There's Joachim, who left 5 acoustic recordings as his entire legacy. Barely 20 minutes of music, maybe. And before that, you had Spohr, and we had Paganini, and we had, these people who are amazing, legendary names, but nobody heard them. So they're names for the history books. People may have heard the names, but they don't know the music. They have no engagement with the music. And today, of course, starting in the 20th century, people started making records. So we have audible documentation of what all of these people sounded like and what they did. But the irony is that documentation isn't something we can take for granted, because unless it's available in some form and promoted as being available, they're going to suffer the same fate as those legendary names. There's Mahler, the great conductor Mahler, right? Toscanini, the great conductor. If we can't listen to his recordings, the name will survive, undoubtedly. A minor blip in the history of the universe, but active listeners are not going to have access to this stuff, and they're not going to have a living engagement with these artists. Herbert von Karajan, I mean, think about Herbert von Karajan. Von Karajan, they issued the enormous 800 CD or 900 CD, whatever it was, Herbert von Karajan box. And then all these mini boxes, and all these, but they're all gone. They're gone. Now, you might say, well, there's always streaming services. Well, there are, but it's not a question of just finding a place where you're going to stick it, you're going to park it, and somebody who wants to download it can find it if they want to. It's not about that because they have to know to look for it. And they have to know where they'll find it if they want to look for it. And there has to be some kind of information being exchanged between the people who own this material and produce this material and those who consume the material. And I don't see it happening anywhere. Do you? I mean, I just don't see it out there. I don't think, the streaming services are all wonderful, but they don't represent specific labels in the same way that the labels represent specific labels. They can do anything they want. They can put stuff anywhere that they feel like. I can't imagine them getting behind Leonard Bernstein or Herbert von Karajan or George Schulte or John Martineau or any of these people and saying, okay, this is important. This is really meaningful. And making a special promotion and outreach to the classical music community to say, we have this body of work and it's available and we would like you to sample it. And there's nothing like that happening. Think of Schulte. Schulte was the Grammy champion, remember. He won more Grammys than any other artist in the history of anything. And made boxes of stuff, boatloads of stuff with the London Phil, with the Chicago Symphony primarily, had huge quantities of opera recordings with the Vienna Philharmonic for Decca. I mean, his ring will probably always be out there. But the rest of it, all of the other stuff he did, all of those recordings that we were deluged with in the 70s and the 80s and 90s, they're all out of print or vanishing or vanished. And we talk about them because we already own them. We already have them. We have the library. We have the basis for the conversation. But new people who are getting into classical music are coming to this for the first time and aren't familiar with the names of these artists. How are they going to get familiar with it? How are they going to pay attention and know that these were the big names? These are the things that were worth, listening to or paying attention to. I don't know. I just see these artists vanishing. They're becoming nothing but names, not, living musical voices. And I don't have the answer to it. I'm just thinking about it. I find it very, very curious. I mean, I don't know how much repertoire is going to be available. I don't know whether any of it's going to be available. But I just see nothing, absolutely nothing happening at any of these labels to actively promote their artists to the classical music community at large. Nothing, zippo, which means that these people's reputations, to the extent they depended on recordings, on the availability of their products and people's ability to actually access and listen and have a conversation within the community of classical music lovers, all of that's just vanishing like a soap bubble. And it's ironic that it should vanish at a time when it's so readily available. It's so easy to keep all this stuff around, in digital formats. The more music we have, it seems, the less it seems to matter. And the less these artists matter. And the less reputations are preserved and passed down from one generation of listeners to the next. God only knows what's going to happen. I haven't a clue. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.